Ανεβήκαμε πάνω. Καλημέρα. Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome, everyone.
It's bright up here.
It's nice to be back here, opening the 5th year of the AI Summit series. I'm here with my dear friend, John Papikas, who's the CTO of eSatisfaction.
And hello from my side. I'm here with George Nikolaopoulos, CTO Anatech Banking Solutions, and we're here to welcome you and to open this two-day summit this day. We'll make a short introduction of who we are, what we're doing, and then we will proceed with the talks. Yes, it works.
Awesome. It works.
So, first of all, we are a product-led hub. We are founded in 2019. We are 5 years in running. We are a career acceleration platform, and we have our goal to create a community of product engineering leaders who can share knowledge, best practices, and meet at summits like this. We have 2 main acts. We are based on trainings that are both either cohorts or corporate trainings, and we have some to announce later on this presentation. And of course, we do summits like this. We will also describe the summit we have this year, and we have been doing summits for the last many years, and this is good. Today is our 5th year, and that's great for us. We are trusted by tech leaders out there, and thank you all for that. And some of you might be here, so thanks again. And I would like to introduce what for the first time, we're introducing AI corporate training. This is a great opportunity for us. It's a great moment for us. So we are switching to AI. We know what is AI, and we are all here today about this. We have tailored trainings, as we said. It's either corporate or personal tailored, based on your needs. We adjust them to your needs. And of course, we have AI certification programs where you can participate as individuals and they get a certification out of how to become an AI engineer or an AI product manager. We have 2 upcoming courses for AI. One of them is tomorrow. We have John Michailidis talking about generative AI and how you can leverage this to build an application, a program, an app. And we have the AI product bootcamp. It's coming on May. I will be your instructor. And then we have our first, basically, product bootcamp. We will go through a series of how you can become a product AI manager, how you can leverage AI and all this experimentation to build perfect or AI perfect applications. And yes, we are looking forward to having you there. And with this, I can give this to my colleague.
Thanks a lot. So, as we said, this is the first European series in AI. It's a program around tech, product, and leadership. Today is the tech flavor, which you're gonna see what we're gonna talk today in a couple of slides. Next iteration is the product one, again here in the same venue, May 16th. We're gonna go Ioannina this year in the Joist Tech Park, which is 21st of May, which is again the tech flavor of the AI series. And the leadership, VPs, C-level executives are gonna join us in October, venue to be announced. So, 2 days event, today and tomorrow. We're gonna talk about transparency, biases, programming languages, QA, strategy, your own career growth within the AI era. What does that mean for you? What does it mean for your companies? What does it mean for the tools that you use as engineering or engineering managers? And as you can see, it's quite a packed agenda. Today's technical sessions, we have also a lab, and we have certifications of attendance. We have more than 400 people today with us. Some are kind of late waiting for the coffee. We have more than 20 hours of coffee and 20 hours of content and coffee and food. Yeah, 20 hours of coffee, that would be absurd. And 16 speakers. So I hope you'll enjoy the day. And let's introduce our keynote speaker.
Of course. Thank you very much, George. So I'm going to introduce our first keynote speaker, Jonathon Wright, Chief AI Technology Officer at Eggplant AI. Apologies. He's going to talk about AI assurance, Agentic AI with computer use automation agents.
Welcome, Jonathon.
Thanks, guys. Wonderful. Excellent. Well, what an easy introduction, and as there's a few people here, and I haven't had 20 shots of coffee, which is my normal, I will take a quick selfie with this to keep everyone kind of looking and happy, trying to be happy in the audience for about 3 seconds. So, let's get on with this. You know, this talk, I suppose, evolved its title probably on a daily basis for quite a while. And so I kind of wanted, especially after just that quick introduction of talking about, I suppose, what training skills you need to become an AI engineer, but also AI product manager, right? Which I think is really quite interesting. So I actually, about 12 years ago, I moved to Silicon Valley. So I'm based out in Santa Rosa, which is north of the valley, if you've been to Silicon Valley. And I actually work for a company which is the original Hewlett-Packard, which I'm going to show you in a second, which is the original foundation blocks of Silicon Valley. When I moved over there, I became head of product for cognitive engineering for a company now called Broadcom. And so actually I was a product lead, just like that session tomorrow, which you're going to see from my good friend who may be here. I don't see him in the audience. I know he's taking his kids to school, so he's probably quite late. But back in 2017, I did this TED talk on cognitive engineering, and I was, like I said, I was at Stanford at the time. I was doing some lecturing on this side of things, and I put up some of these kind of key words on the right-hand side. And one of those, I guess, is around what we're doing today. We're talking about how do we, augment our skills, enable our AI skills so that we can, do better in our careers when it comes to AI. And so I evolved this with the idea of, well, not only the items in the background, and again, this was probably 7 or 8 years ago, what is the evolution? What does it look like? And I guess we're going to go through this afternoon my first Agentic AI workshop of 2025. We're going to learn about some of these things like computer use agents, about large vision models, large action models, what Agentic AI really means. It's not just a giant buzzword, but partly I'm going to go back to, I suppose, 1939 and talk about the birth, really, of not only Silicon Valley, which, if you know, on the left-hand side, that's the original garage, where Bill and Dave was making equipment to build and test. And then really it foundated from there. And then on the right-hand side, again, a few miles from where I used to live, is a place called Bletchley Park. Now, I guess everyone's heard of Bletchley Park, hopefully. Somewhere, one person, nobody? Okay. So obviously on the right-hand side, that's when Alan Turing wrote his original work on artificial intelligence. And I had a bit of a rant last week when I was in Rotterdam speaking about Agentic AI, explaining to people that the modern use of the term AI seems to refer to generative AI, right? Which is such a small subset of machine learning. It's natural language processing, natural language understanding, and natural language generation. But for some reason, we now use the word AI and somehow refer to large language models, which are so small. Whereas 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I was in the Valley, we were all focused on deep learning and machine learning and TensorFlow and really what could we do with classic machine learning. So I want to bring us back a little bit to that because I think those foundations haven't changed. Yes, there's new and shiny stuff that seems to have happened since 2019, but in actual fact, when we talk about artificial intelligence, we go all the way back to what you see on the back, which is the original Turing device. Now, actually, I asked them because it's just Bletchley Park was around the corner from me when I was in Oxford, and we were an Oxford startup company, which was a model-based company focused on synthetic data generation. We were acquired, but in actual fact, part of this, again, it's, for this case, it was decoding, transmissions, which, on the right-hand side, you can see here, my good friend, Todd DiCaprio, who's written a number of books on effective performance engineering, a really kind of interesting subdomain, I suppose, of what we're talking about. But again, I don't see things have changed, right? Part of it is that natural evolution of AI and machine learning is still there. So I'm going to differentiate that a little bit today, and I'm going to go through some of the technologies, the stuff that I'm working with people like Microsoft and Google and Sam from OpenAI, and a number of other people who are, I guess, exploring this area and accelerating the growth at the moment. So again, I made a lot of mistakes in this talk. If you ever do watch it, you just go to TED.com and then just search for cognitive engineering. But one of them was I kind of talked about predicting the areas where I thought AI would potentially replace, or AI workforce replacement. So we've all heard of Stargate, which is interesting because Stargate has been going for the last 2 years. They've been building out those AI data centers long before they announced I think it's 10 billion or 20 billion pounds that they were going to spend towards building this US superpower. And we all heard the exciting, interesting news around DeepSeek, which knocked $1.2 trillion off the US stock exchange within 24 hours. I did joke to one of my friends, Jason Arbon, who wrote the book on how Google tests. I sent him a message yesterday saying, Elon's lost 20 billion yesterday. So everyone saw this in the news, right? So 20 billion off his net worth, because I'm going to show a few examples in my workshop later around Grok and some of the, I guess, less underwhelming implementations of AI that actually the focus of AI, and especially, I suppose, generative, is we saw certain capabilities like artists, musicians. So if you use sumo.ai, you can generate a track. And at other events, I did just over 100 events last year in 56 countries. On some of them, I actually created a song that was actually talking about my talk and in the natural language which we did. I actually did this at WeTest, if anyone went to WeTest Athens last year. So I actually danced on the stage, which is probably not a good one for this morning. It's way too early for anything like that. It's a definitely post-afternoon thing. But anyway, part of this is there was this concerning number. So I remember standing up in 2012 and hitting this figure, which was 212 years is spent reading emails just in the US every day, back in 2012. And I kind of thought to myself, this is incredibly concerning. It's also a lot of waste. We talk about the digital grind, about doing activities that don't really add any value. And I suppose if you're looking at the training stuff that these guys are putting together, it'd be really valuable because actually you can improve your productivity and save doing some of the, I'm going to call it low-hanging fruit, but the stuff that's not as valuable, what you're not really contributing a massive impact to, and actually focus on more important tasks. So I was at Google DeepMind, I think this was like 3 years ago, and our marketing people decided that this was a sensible number. I'm realizing I'm wearing the same shirt, but I can't get the exact pose correct in this thing. But yeah, so part of it was they put this number up there saying 35% of all activities could potentially be replaced with AI. Now, I genuinely do believe this number. I never did when I looked at it, but actually 2 weeks ago, my friend Diego from Forrester flew in, and he started creating some publications back in 2019, and he was calling them Turing bots. Now, obviously, the nod was to Alan Turing to say, okay, how do we build, and it isn't bots, which is a bad name, and agentic AI isn't agents, even though suddenly I think we all, seem to lead into that way. But really what it's talking about is two things, is that actually these agentic AI capabilities, and again, this was 2019 when he published this, if you're using something like cursor.com or you're using Copilot for GitHub, if you're a developer, you're going to see this kind of productivity, maybe 15, 20%. And I've spoken to the GitLab and the GitHub people, and I kind of agree with that. But at the same time, I also see the impact in code quality and just being accelerating the ability to not just grab some code from a repository and then just include it into your area, into your code base. Usually, there's actually more steps you're doing. Whereas if you use cursor.com, you're quickly going to be able to build an application and get it working. So my youngest is 17, and she literally sent me a message last week while I was in Rotterdam saying, I can't compile this Python code for this game that I'm building, what I need to do for college. Can you debug it for me? And I went, no, but cursor.com can. Download it, do it. And then she wrote back to me, she says, is my teacher going to think I'm cheating? And I went, well, not really, because when I was doing my high-performance computing degree, in the 90s, I was told, yeah, you won't have a calculator with you, so you have to do the distributed parallel processing in Occam by hand and write all the equations out. I'm like, no, I've got a calculator in my pocket. I don't need that. This stuff isn't going away. You need to think about, well, how do you wrap around processors that actually support this accelerated, augmented capabilities that actually are going to then go to this next level, which is, unlocking that 35% that was made up. But in actual fact, when you look about cross-software development lifecycle capabilities, just like the 2 training sessions that were called out this morning, if I'm in product and say maybe I'm in analyze and design kind of landscape, I want to be able to use, let's call it Figma for a second, to mock something up, create a wireframe, and then I want my agentic AIs to go, oh, okay, I can build that, in React or Flutter or whatever front-end mobile app you're using. That's easy, right? We've all seen the examples where you can literally take a photo of something and say, okay, Claude, write me the code for this application and get it running. And it will, right? Really quite simple. But actually, that's what NVIDIA were talking about having agentic AI augmenting their employees, right? So they're saying they can see the 30% reduction of staff, which is not what we really want, but they can get the benefits from using these agentic endpoints to actually enrich and talk between different teams, picking up tasks, reading documentation, all that kind of basic stuff. And I did this, as you probably saw for the keen eye of you on the TED Talk, I put this on the whiteboard. And I did this publication on leanpub.com/digital, which was a free ebook. And I did this literally 15 years ago. And I think part of it is we have to think about what stages of the life cycle we're trying to add value, whether it's the thinking activity, the creating of actual code or product or whatever else it is, and then the learning, whether that be chaos engineering, A/B testing, whatever else. Part of it is this is an evolutional process. Now, the other thing what I really liked about the guys when they did the intro at the start was they kind of said, okay, well, how do you wrap around transparency and governance around these kind of new capabilities? And I genuinely believe, if there were, 50 of you came up to me afterwards and said, Jonathon, what should I be doing? I'd talk to them about AI assurance, because I see it as a massive growing area. Who's assuring that these AI-infused platforms do what they say they're doing? And so I see it as partially a new role, but also I see the new regulations that are coming in, stuff that I've been forced to do in the US, the new European AI Act that comes into place, has already come into place on the 2nd of February for AI literacy, which means everyone in this room should be sent on the training because it's actually part of the European Union's goal to have everyone enabled to be able to actually use these tools safely, effectively, efficiently, transparently, auditably. They need to have that rigor, because I keep on talking to people, and I joked with our HR department yesterday, which I know I'm going to get into a lot of trouble for, because I had another CrowdStrike-related incident. And I said to them, should it be doing this? And they said, oh, well, we should be reading everything that happens on your laptop. And it kind of felt like, which I know they do, they'd used Copilot thinking, oh, Copilot's just OpenAI tenanted in Azure, so that's fine to expose this information. But I got a very generic response saying, yeah, in your contract it says, everything you do is owned by us. Every thought you have is owned by us. I was like, not sure that's the case, but I get what you're coming from. But I think part of it is an emerging area. So the other thing what I keep on getting asked over and over again is around, well, what are the use cases? Because, you know, part of it is, we talked about the thinking, making, and checking aspect, but, you know, what could you use these tools for? Now, I know they put in the headline a little bit around the fact that there's a QA aspect. So I'm going to talk about it from a quality engineering perspective just for a second, just to give you an idea. And for those people who, I guess, mandatory or not mandatory are turning up to the workshop this afternoon, I'm going to go through some of this in much more detail. I'm actually going to show you the tools, all open source, all stuff you can download and start using. But there's this kind of view of, well, what are the activities? You know, if you've got requirements, you can have specifications. Last week, there was a lot of talk around executable specifications going out of fashion, right? And I remember having a deep conversation with Dan North, probably 15 years ago, when we were talking about behavior-driven development, this idea of, you know, actually creating a test, then creating the code after to make it pass. And then last week, they literally said, no, you shouldn't be doing that. Gherkin needs to go away. Everything's now in Atlassian or something, right? That is the source of truth. And I say, okay, that's the source of truth. And then I read a Confluence page, which is also a source of truth. And then I also listen to a transcript of a meeting which I didn't turn up to because I'm on stage. And then a product manager tells me another set of truths. So part of it is, well, where is this information? And, you know, we partially misinterpreted the Agile Manifesto by saying working software over documentation. And now we have RAG architecture, which I know there's a session tomorrow about, where we want documentation, we want knowledge, we want information, but nothing's written down. And I'm like, well, every time you have a conversation, there's a transcript function. You know, if for those who are really keen-eyed and use a Windows laptop, which is unfortunate, I have that pleasure, you'll notice that Microsoft have started sending something to Microsoft Graph. Now, anyone heard of Microsoft Graph? The one person at the front, which is worrying to a way, doesn't do graphs, it's just a knowledge graph. So I'm going to be talking about GraphRAG architecture later on. But what it's doing is it's sending a GraphQL from your machine, if you turn on Fiddler or some other Wireshark, sending it about uploading your OneDrive content, uploading, you know, your transcripts from meetings, starting to pull this information across into a tenanted knowledge graph, because they want to be able to use Copilot Plus, which if anyone's used Copilot Plus, and I haven't got my laptop on stage, but it has an NPU, a neural processing unit, and it'll actually run everything locally, right? So part of it is it's what Sam's doing at the moment. He's building automation. So when you click Copilot Plus and say to it, edit this video, what's being recorded now, and transcribe it, translate it into Greek, fine. You know, I don't know how to use Photoshop or Adobe Premiere. However, it will load the applications up and actually drive them in front of your eyes and do the activity. So that 30% activity, which usually I have to ask a guy called Nico, who's based out in Brazil, to do for me, is just done on my desktop, right? But the more it knows about your organization, the better it can actually make it more contextual. So semantics is absolutely everything. And so this afternoon, I'm going to show a few things. I'm going to show PyAuto GUI, which is interesting, because, surprise, surprise, the language of choice is Python, because there's more code for it to train against. So if you're using stable code, or you're using the new Claude 3.7 Sonnet code edition, they're much better at generating Python than they are COBOL Turbo, right? Not that you should be writing in COBOL or Lisp, right? But you know, there is a place for it. The other thing I'm going to show you is Omniparser. So again, for those people who are watching Microsoft because they know that Sam's delivering all the AI goodness into Microsoft, is that actually Omniparser, which we're going to do a workshop on later, is an incredibly performant large action model, the model that can drive Photoshop and Premiere and drive the transitions, do the translations, sort out the audio quality, and facial tracking, whatever else you need to do. But also, it's in essence like YOLO, and YOLO is you only look once. So it's a computer vision engine, something we've had in our product for nearly 15 years, is around this capability to actually detect images and then also classify objects in near-ish real time. So every time it looks at the screen, it's looking at it going, oh, where am I? And I always make the joke about the fact that, you know, play Taylor Swift or Tay-Tay or whatever you want to call it, and it looks at my desktop when I'm using the Mac, and it says, I can't see Spotify. And the reason it can't see Spotify is because I'm too tight to pay for Spotify. So the next thing it does is it opens up the menu and slides across in the Apple Mac prettiness or whatever it is, and tries to look for iTunes. Clicks on iTunes, realizes I haven't got an iTunes account. So it then goes, okay, I now need to find another way to play this song. So it then, in essence, using cognitive reckoning, it then loads a browser up and goes, I'll just go to YouTube, right? Goes onto YouTube, realizes I don't pay for YouTube either. Something's coming out here, right? But then it sees an ad, and it says, oh, I can skip this. And then eventually it hits its mission, which is play the track, and it's learned a journey through. But every time it's doing its act, reckon, sense activities over and over again, it's learning the path through the application. And that's where people kind of keep on saying to me, well, these large action models, Jonathon, that you're talking about, are going to be no use whatsoever because they don't know my proprietary system that's behind my firewall. Well, that's what Recall was, which could have been Total Recall, which is a great movie. Well, the first one was. But part of it is Open Recall, or Recall, was supposed to just take screenshots of everything you were doing on your PC. Now, don't get me wrong, that's probably worse than the GraphQL stuff that's happening with Microsoft Graph. But you know, part of it is they want to learn the applications, the mainframe systems, the actions you're doing, and then surprise, surprise, Copilot plus Studio is process mining what everyone in this room is doing today. So if all you're doing is going to Excel, doing a power pivot on data that you've pulled out from Salesforce, it can do that. It can see you're doing that for the month-end report, right? And it can just do it for you. It's, you know, it's not rocket science. And then we'll cover things like UFO, UI-TARS, some of the other frameworks that exist, and we'll actually probably even go to the point where we'll use a computer use agent. I'm going to point to the guy at the front because he was the only guy putting his hand up at the start, but has people used computer use agents before? So this is operator if it's, oh, you've moved over to the other side. That was impressive. But, you know, operator was just a joke. It was a bit of a joke within SAM just to showcase what they'd been doing because they bought everyone in the valley who was doing Selenium, right? What they were actually doing and what Microsoft actually have is what Claude computer use is. So Claude computer use? Yes? There we go. One person in here who's doing it. So you can go to Claude computer use now and literally use all that reckoning and everything else and literally launch your desktop app or your mainframe app, and it will test it, it'll learn it, it'll understand it. So a lot of technology there, right? But let's go into the maybe why shouldn't we be doing this, right? I don't know how long I've got. Probably 20 minutes. It's all right. So like I said, there's two quite interesting things. The first one was the new August, the AI Act came into play, right? The 2nd of February, AI literacy came into fact, which meant we need to send everyone on that training course that they talked about earlier. But then in August this year is AI liability, which means you can be fine liable. Now, they love this based on the fact that it's 35 million euros or 7% of your gross profit, depending on the level of fine. So like GDPR, even though that never really happened, but you know, it was supposed to stop people just going off and saying, you know what, I'll use ChatGPT and I'll make clinical decisions. And don't even joke, I spoke at the digital healthcare event, and the person who came on stage with me literally said, oh, we've just rolled out ChatGPT to all the NHS across the UK to do clinical diagnosis. And I went, no, you haven't. That's, you know, completely illegal. And he went, no, we did. And we were like, oh my gosh, you know, if you ask ChatGPT what to do, it says, oh, just cut the leg off. You know, part of it is you are going to be liable for that, right? And then I made this mistake, which is worth taking a photo of. I know a few people did earlier on. Is I wrote this book about 2 years ago around artificial intelligence, building systems that you can trust. I'd say it's a bestseller, but the problem is because I give it away for free, it's probably not, right? And what I'm recommending is take a photo, don't click on the link, take a photo, and then when you get home, open it in a browser, because if you open it in a browser, you can just right-click on the actual PDF and save it to file without putting any details in or anything else. Not that I'm trying to bypass our system for a second, but, you know, definitely download this. And so this was done by the ISO 29119 Part 11 working group, which I was part of about 5 or 6 years ago, building AI systems. Now, Adam, who you can see in the top left-hand corner, and probably a few of you probably know Rex Black. He's a fellow from New Zealand, guy like myself. But Adam actually was in the news this week because he was in Paris talking about the new AI acts that are coming into place, and he's part of like myself, he's really involved with the European Commission around actually putting this stuff into place, right? Now, if we quickly look here, that's the ISO 29119 Part 11, not that exciting, but this document here, which again, I'm not going to say this because I just get into so much trouble, but if you did search for ISO 42001.pdf, somebody seems to have left it on their FTP site on Google, and then you can download, which is in essence a €3,000 document for free until that person decides to take it off their FTP site, which, again, I didn't tell you that, but it's interesting. But what you'll find, and I'm not even going to bother pressing this laser pen because it'd be massively underwhelming, but this is actually an AI risk framework, and it's actually really quite good. Usually, I know people say, not interested about ISO, Jonathan, just skip it quickly because, you know, I want to get my first coffee of the day, or 20 coffees, or 20 hours of coffee. I don't know, they're all the same, right? But this framework, a bit like AI-TRiSM, which was a bad attempt first time round, this is actually really good, right? And what's interesting about this is the 42001 standard, everyone has to comply against. So every company that acts in the European Union, every company in the United States, have to become 42000 accredited. So I talked about that job that's going to be for life, a bit like the 9000 series for the quality standards. This is a great opportunity to go, okay, I'll come in and make sure what you're doing is correct. And actually, it's a great opportunity for people who are wanting to get there, you know, to have a 5-10 year career in this area, right? Now, I put this slide in, which I always want to delete, actually. I don't know why it's still there. But this is our internal document around Gen AI, right? Which I'm sure I shouldn't be sharing, especially if HR are going to send me any more ChatGPT generated outputs, right? But, you know, I joked, and you probably saw if you follow me on LinkedIn, it's linkedin.com/in-automation, so that's my username. But I was sat having quite a big debate with Jason Arbon, one of the top guys in our industry, just created another platform, sold his last platform to Google, and he's very much in this kind of space. Is he said, I kind of made the statement last night, and I was driving back from south of the coast last night. We're meeting some of my friends. We're CEO of a data company for Temenos banking. And I wrote back to him, I said, you should never use ChatGPT for anything. And it was one of those kind of clickbait statements, right, where everyone jumped on and said, why can't I use ChatGPT? And the whole point is you shouldn't be sharing anything that's IP sensitive, right? So even though you might not feel that a requirement specification with all your DoD, Department of Justice, defense specs isn't that sensitive, you should not be asking questions to ChatGPT. Equally, you probably won't get away with Copilot Plus incognito mode. You should really think about deploying a map model locally, building a RAG architecture like the lady who's doing the workshop tomorrow is going to show. But actually, I'm going to show how to do this later with LM Studio and different ways you can potentially just run all this stuff securely offline. Now, I mentioned about the fact that people, well, you need to be able to audit your AI. Now, this is the questions that they sent us back end of last year. So our Keysight acquired the head of AI from Apple, and this guy, Tamway, really nice guy, kind of came in, said, oh, well, we're building AI. You know, we released AI in our product back in 2017, and now we're audited every year as part of the executive order 14110. Now, this states that, in essence, we have to prove why that we're doing the necessary validation of our capabilities that we're releasing to the public. Because, of course, we have people like automotive customers, people like Tesla that you can go and buy some stock at now at half price or whatever it is. Use us for autonomous radar emulation. They use us for Car2X. They use us for Vehicle 2X. All our capabilities have AI built into them, machine learning. So how do we prove to them that we're doing the necessary validation? And then if you're bored ever, which won't happen, especially these European documents down here, I'd recommend checking out the AI Standards Hub and then just typing in which industry you're in. So if you're in healthcare, drop the bar down for healthcare, and it'll list all of the different documents that you need to do. Now, fair enough, if you're Trump, he'll say, well, we're not going to touch the European stuff, so we won't comply with it. But in actual fact, they still have to comply. The difference is they're not quite as evolved as the European communities who have realized that there's a reason we're doing this in education, which was the latest publication. You can't use facial recognition for children's applications and stuff. It's pretty simple, but it also gives you the operating framework, right? So anyway, plenty to think about on there, right? And I know I've already got like 5 minutes, so I'm going to flick through some of this stuff quite quickly. So, like I said, liability directive is pretty serious. It's worth looking at. Again, probably more of a scare factor to send you on the training and give you a pay rise, right? That's the only 2 reasons I do that. Now, the other reason, obviously, I used to work at Microsoft a long time ago, and, I was laughing at the fact that they just published this, right? Which is Microsoft's a framework for doing AI. Now, I could literally have gone 10 years ago and gone to PwC or to any of the big consultancy firms and ask them, what's the big data framework you're going to use, or what's the IoT framework? And they would have just done a find and replace on the word AI and given me the exact same thing. But in all fairness, credit where credit's due, Microsoft have published this, there's stuff behind each one, which is not a bad operating framework. If you're just wanting to start from day one and go, look, boss, I need to comply against all this stuff. I need to have this maturity and governance framework in place. Otherwise, there's no way I can, do my job. And I joke, Jason, it says this is the only slide that he actually thinks I did a good job on. But, AI is not going to jail, right? It's probably somebody who works there, and you're probably liable somewhere. So I sent, as I was walking in, my boss, Gareth, who's the CEO of Eggplant, I sent him a message, and he's just taken over the directorship. So he's the director or whatever now of the entire company. The liability falls on him. So if I build something which completely does something illegal, he's the one going to jail, which I did say to him, but I don't think he cares that much, right? Or maybe he's going to, rush to another country, right? So, like I said, I released a platform, a generative AI platform back in 2022. I stood up on stage mistakenly in Gartner, I think this was Las Vegas, and I said, wow, look what I've done. And this is our CEO of the company. I said, oh, look, I've created a low-code prompting system which you can take an input and it'll generate the code. And here's the code generation capability that does it. And also I created this, like Clippy, a chat interface which you can talk to it. Nobody cared. Everyone was like, well, the code generation's 10 to a penny, right? Actually, prompt engineering, and we'll talk about this later in my workshop, actually prompt engineering is a double-edged sword. We've been running training for the last 2 years saying, let's do prompt tuning, prompt engineering. Actually, I see it as shadow prompting, right? I'm not going to write as good prompt as Jason's going to write, because he does it every single day. So now I don't. I use the prompt generator from Anthropic because it writes much better prompts than I could ever write. Now, that's the whole point, is this technology is moving so quickly that actually there's no point of trying to learn a foundational skill that's going to solve all the problems, because it isn't, right? Part of it is you have to think about, where do I add value? Where can I play into the strengths? And you looked at something, I met up with the Gartner guys a couple of weeks back, a guy called Joachim, who put this together. And if anyone's interested, I can send them the 70-page version. Obviously, I did send it to my friend Dan North, because behavior-driven development's at the bottom of the wave now, and I thought he'd be quite entertained by that. But he's got young kids, so he doesn't really care anymore. But what you'll see on the hype curve right at the top is AI software engineering. The reason why you're here today, right, is that it's the hottest thing in the industry. Actually, it's only going to get more traction. And so I said to you, look, I'm going to explain this afternoon, which is why I cut my slides down for this presentation. I'm going to explain to you why agentic is not generative, and it also is not, I guess, agents or bots, right? And so this is me in the Gartner offices, actually, I think in California. And I love drawing on boards. I just can't help myself, right? It's like a bit of a problem I've got. But what you'll see here, apart from my horribly overused diagram in the middle, is that actually it's around sense, plan, action, reason, reckon, and memory, right? And we've all seen the same blueprint. It's not like it's something new. But I was kind of sitting there with the analysts going, look, this is difficult. And we're going to look at this stuff this afternoon, right? We're going to look at Edge ML. We're going to look at computer vision capabilities like YOLO. We're going to look at, large action models. We're going to look at the stuff on the left-hand side, which no one cares about, of chain of thought and visualization of thought. We're going to address each one of these components. And then we're also, with that information from Microsoft Graph, we're going to use business context about what you use internally, which is why you're so valuable at the moment, until they harvest it all off, and also industry content, feeding it knowledge graphs from IEEE standards around autonomous vehicle radar simulation stuff, right? You have to have all of these components, and then it looks like this. And so I stood on stage, I think this was in Lisbon actually, which isn't that far away, and I kind of said to them, as much as I hate this term, but we will look through it, model garden. I never agreed with the idea that we were going to do domain-specific models, right? Have a model that's fine-tuned against clinical decisions. Oh, wait a second, Google have already done that. And actually, if you're a Fitbit customer and you've got a new Google phone, it will run on the NPU on your phone. So when, they're nearly on the way over with a taxi driver, you're in a car crash and you've got no cell reception, you've still got a physician on your phone running locally through the NPU. So part of it is your model gardens or your different domain-specific models. You might have fitness, nutrition, health, whatever it may be. These are all just components, right? So there's a lot more to it than the generative capabilities. And also, things like DeepSeek, which is great to show that the Chinese can use T80 cards, or T100 cards to do the equivalent of what we're doing with T80 cards. But in actual fact, chain of thought, visualization of thought, it's been around for a very long time. It's just showcasing it, bringing it to the masses to say, wait a second, if it goes through this reasoning, it can do much better quality output. So anyway, I know I'm slightly over, and I've only got less than a minute left. You don't care about this, so I'll put it onto the next. I'll put it in my other session. But I presented this to our CEO in the Valley quite recently, and I said, model gardens and the registries are really important. Digital twins, knowledge graphs, really important. AI insurance, massively important. Edge ML devices like the NVIDIA one that's behind me, where there's edge compute to do this. Computer use agents, auto discovery through visualization and vision models are great. And then finally, these capabilities, the benchmark that I submitted last week or the week before is up to 97%, right? So this one I think is 88%, which is the UI TAR stuff. But in actual fact, it now can go through 25 steps on your machine without having an issue. So that's literally, I'd call that enterprise grade. This stuff is real. I'm going to talk about operators later. I'll talk about visualization of thought later. I'll talk about all the different standards later, and I know he wants me off the stage. So let me just finish with this one statement, which is overplayed, and it isn't my quote, but it isn't AI that's going to replace you, right? It's the person that's using AI that will, unless you attend the workshop this afternoon, and then you'll be the person replacing other people, right? So that makes it nice and easy. So anyway, thanks. I hope there was a bit of energy to keep you going, and handing it back to the guys.
Wait, Jonathan, thanks a lot. Are there any questions for Jonathon? Okay.
You can grab me anytime.
You'll find him in the workshop and outside. All right, cool.
Thank you
Thanks
very
a
much.
lot, Jonathon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.